Hi thinkers, welcome to the data science course on ThinkX Academy. In this video we are going to study the GroupBy function, which is basically a very useful function when we are trying to do data aggregation. So in the previous tutorial we have already discussed about data aggregation and how we can perform data aggregation using a GroupBy technique and also rolling window. In this tutorial we are going to focus on the GroupBy technique, which actually uses three steps, which is splitting, applying the operation and then combining. So we are going to see it in action in Python, and here we are going to pick up a data set from kaggle.com. So I have taken this very simple data set, which is actually a store data set. So in this data set we have the items, the sales. I will show you what that data set is, and the link to this dataset is in the description of this video, so you can check that out. So the first things first, I'm going to show you the dataset. So this is a CSV format, and here I'm going to open this dataset, and here you can see we have the month and we have store code, then we have the quantity of the item sold, then we have value of those items, then we have a group of hair conditioners, and then we have the name of the company. MBRD means mother brand, so this is actually the mother brand. So these are the following columns of this data set, and we are going to import this data set in Python, and we will use some of these columns and we will perform grouping and data aggregation so that we can accomplish our very important task of extracting some information or some knowledge from this data set. Alright, so basically this data set is actually having 14,000 something rows. So here you can see I am going to use pandas library to import the store.csv and make sure that it is actually pointing to this notebook. So the CSV file should be stored in the same directory as where this Python this Jupyter notebook is located. So now you can see this is the read CSV function we are using, and now I'm going to do a very simple task, which is to understand the shape of this whole data set, and you can see it has 14,260 rows and 10 columns. So basically, as a data scientist, you need this techniques that we are going to study today, which is GroupBy technique. You will understand how this technique is going to help us understand and make the data set shorter and more understandable, right? So first things first, I am going to do a very important task here. We are going to use the NumPy library also, so I'm going to quickly import NumPy as np, and I'm going to use another utility or a library, which is actually the IPython, and I will show you the usage of this IPython.display library, and I'm going to quickly import the display function. Alright, so now let's move on to the very first task, which is actually the data set has a lot of columns. So basically the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use only those columns which I'm actually interested in. So in this data set I have some columns that I think are useful, and they are actually going to be useful in giving me a knowledge and idea about the data set. And also one more thing, we will have to select which of the following columns or features are actually going to give you more information and where the grouping is possible, right? So it is indeed a very important task. So we are going to pick up only those columns, and we know that for that we are going to use the iloc function or the locator function we can use. So I am quickly going to write df.loc, and in order to make things simpler, I'm going to consider only the first 6,000 rows, and here I'm going to specify the columns that I want to monitor or do the grouping of, right? So in this data set we have a column named as month. So actually there are 3 months, M1, M2 and M3 in this data set, and we have different quantity of items being sold in respective months. Let's move on to some other interesting columns that I have found out here, which is store code is also useful, because if I want to analyze the data set, if I want to do the grouping store wise, I can also do that. Then another important one is quantity, because I am interested in how many sales happened during that month, right? So quantity is also useful. Then we have value of those products that were sold, and finally is the MBRD, which is the mother brand, which is actually the brand of the amount that is being sold in the respective month, with the respective source store code, quantity and value, right? So here this line is very important, because this is a very important step, because as a data scientist, what you will have to do is you will have to understand which columns are useful and which are not. If you're able to filter that out, it will help you in do the grouping and further sampling and various data pre-processing tasks. So first things first, instead of doing all of this and all the 14,000 rows, we are actually considering only a small amount of rows, right? So we can see the results of the grouping. Now let's move on to a very important thing, which is we are going to take a look at our data frame, which is now going to contain these 5 columns. So instead of using print, we are going to use this display function, which we have imported using ipython.display. And the reason why we are using display is it actually gives a good format of the table. So if I will write here display df.head, and I want to display the first 20 rows. Okay, so it is actually showing an error here. Okay, so here it should be MBRD and import display. Okay, so it should not be from, it should be from, right? So from ipython.display import display. So this is a function. You can see that it gives a nice formatting of columns and rows. So these are the 5 columns and these are the rows. So it is better than print, because if you will try to print it, you will see that it is not a good format, right? So I always use this display function. So a very quick utility function here. Okay, so I'm going to now comment this out, and now let's move on to the important task which we are here for today, which is grouping. So the first step of grouping is to understand the motive of grouping, right? So what is the motive of grouping? The first thing is you need to understand which feature are you actually interested in to do the grouping, right? So which feature to group, right? So you will have to actually decide which feature out of these 5 values, which one of these you think you are going to use to do the grouping, right? And we know that there are 3 steps in grouping, which is the split step, and then we have the apply step, and finally we have the combine step, right? So these are the 3 steps that are involved. Fortunately, we have a very simple GroupBy function which will automatically apply these 3 things. So it is just a one-liner, so it's easier to implement here. So let's see, let's use the first one to do the grouping, right? So the first thing is I am actually interested in the total quantity that is sold in a month, right? So in one month I want to understand what is the total quantity of items that are sold in month 1, month 2 and month 3, right? So it is very important. You will see that if I want to do that, it's so much easier. First of all, I will create a df1, which is another data frame. Again, I'm going to use the LOC function, and here I will specify the 6,000 rows, and here I'm going to specify only 2 columns, which is the month and the quantity column, right? So what I'm actually doing is I want to understand how what is the quantity of the items that are sold in a single month, right? So if I want to do that, I'm interested in only these two features, so I'm going to only include it in this data frame 1, right? So once I am done with this, now I can write df1 dot GroupBy function. It is an inbuilt function that the pandas library provide, and there are various variations of this GroupBy function. So I'm going to use month for doing the grouping. So basically what I want is I want month 1, and I want the total quantity of the items that are sold, right, in that single month. So I can actually write dot sum here. So what it will do is it will do the grouping automatically. So it will do the splitting. So it will split the month 1, month 2 and month 3 from this data set, and then it will apply this operation that I'm specifying at the end, which is dot sum. It will apply that, and it will combine that in the single data frame 1, right? So if simply I will write display df1 dot head function, and let's display the first 20 rows, right? So you can see that there are only 3 rows in this df1, which is this data frame, and you can see there are 3 months, m1, m2 and m3, and the quantity of the items that were sold is 27,000, 29,000 and 28,000. So now you can see that if you're a data scientist, if you're given a data set and you want to do a quick analysis of the features that are being provided in a data set, you can use this GroupBy function. So in a nutshell, you know that in these respective months, these are the quantity of items that were sold, right? So instead of sum, there are other things that you can use. You can use mean, you can use the standard deviation, right? So all of them are here, and they are going to change like this, right? So basically this is actually what you need to decide, and it depends on your motive. If you are interested in total quantity, you are going to use the sum function, right? So this is the first step, the first thing that I'm interested in. Let's take a look at some of the different variations of GroupBy function, and let's see how this GroupBy function can help us extract more knowledge from the data set by aggregating, right? So you can see that this was actually a data set of 14,000 rows, but if I'm interested in understanding the total quantity, I need only these 3 rows, right? So that makes the task very easy for the data analysis process also. So let's move on to the second thing, which is I want to now I'm interested in the total quantity that is sold under one category, right? Or let's say that is sold by one company. So we know that these products belong to different companies, and I want to now I'm not interested in which month the amount was sold, right? So I'm not interested in the quantity of items being sold in a month. Now I'm interested in the quantity being sold by a single company, right? So I can do the same thing. I can just copy this, right? And I just need to change the month variable here. I can actually change it to the mother brand, right? And I have the quantity here, and here also I will change to the mother brand, right? So now if I will write display df1 dot head function, and if I write 20 here, and if I hit enter, now you can see that it shows the number of items that was sold by this company, 7 o'clock, then this Archie and RA, and these are the name of the companies, and this was the amount that was sold by these respective companies, right? So if I write df1 dot shape here, you can see now it has only 368 rows, right? So we have done the grouping, we have actually aggregated a lot of rows here. The data set was actually of 6,000 rows, and now we have shrinked it down to 368, and you can see that it also helps us understand different interests that we have, right? So if I'm interested in understanding the if I'm doing analysis, I want to plot a graph where I want to understand how different companies are actually selling the products on my online store. This is actually going to help a lot, right? This technique is actually data pre-processing, so it is going to help in data analysis a lot. All right, so this was another thing that we saw in GroupBy. Let's now understand how can we do grouping by considering more than one feature. So here you can see, here we have only one feature, which is BRD, which is mother brand. Here we have only one feature, which is month. So so far we have only covered how we can do the aggregation or the grouping using single feature. Now let's see how I can actually do it using multiple features. So let's move on to the third interesting thing here, which is now I want to understand what is the amount of, right? So I'm actually interested in the quantity of item sold by a company in respective month, right? So now what I want is, I want to understand, I want to do the grouping on the basis of two things. The first thing is the quantity and the second one is the month, right? So I want to do a grouping, and you can see this is also very easy in Python. I will just simply create another data frame 2, and this data frame 2 is going to have the same thing that we have done here. We can copy this and I can paste it here. Let's change it to df2 like this. So now I'm interested in mother brand quantity, and also let's involve two more, which is the value, right? So we are also including one more thing, which is the value, and let's include the month also, because now we want to do the grouping on the basis of month and quantity, right? So here month, and here we have the mother brand, right? So company and respective month, we want to do that. So here instead of one, you can actually specify more than one column. I can specify mother brand and I can also specify month, right? So what this means is that here in this line, what we are trying to do is we are trying to do the grouping on the basis of two features, which is the brand and the month, right? And then we are going to use dot sum to apply the summation, or we can use mean or anything we want to. So if I will quickly write here display df2 dot head function, and here I will display 20 features. Now you can see this is the output here. So let's analyze this output. Here you can see this is the name of the company, and this is now month here. So you can see in month 1, the quantity of the item of this company 7 o'clock that was sold is 1 here. The value was this, right? So it is actually giving us a lot of information. This here, this data frame df2 is actually giving us more information, and it is more readable than the original data set, right? So we have the company name here, we have the month name, and we know that in that respective month, this is the amount of items that were sold, and this was the value of those items, right? So you can see here we have 6 items were sold in the month M2 of this product RA, and this was the value, right? So here we have done grouping on the basis of the brand and the month, right? So we have brand, and under brand we have done the grouping of months. So this is very interesting thing here. But I would like to show one more variation which you will also like a lot, and it is also useful in a lot of scenarios. So this was one way to do the grouping, which is to actually specify more than one feature. But what will happen if you want to apply more than one operation, right? So let's say you want to understand the sum and also the mean of the number of items, right? At the same time, can you do that? So the answer is yes, you can do that, right? And how you can do that is, instead of using sum here, you can use the aggregate function, which is .agg function. And the way it is done is you just need to specify here more than one operations. You can specify np.mean, or you can specify np. Let's say sum, right? So what will happen is it will give us it will group the month and the brand. And now let's just display this data frame 2 and let's see how this is changed. So here you can see that the grouping is done on the basis of the month and the brand, but you can see under quantity we have two more columns, which is mean and sum, right? Which means that the quantity is actually having two more sub features, which displays the mean of items or the average number of items that were sold in the month M1 and the brand itself here, right? So now you have more knowledge about the data set. You have mean, you have sum, you can even include more like np.standard deviation to get more information about that, right? So you can see this is the data set that you are going to get, right? And here if you will use the shape feature, you will be able to understand how many rows are there inside of this data set. So you can see that there are 997 rows in this data set if you do the grouping on the basis of these two features. So this was another important step, which is using I'll write here, using aggregate function. And using aggregate function, you can perform multiple, you can apply multiple operations at once, right? So if you want to do the grouping and you want multiple operations to apply, you can use .agg function. So basically that's all for this video. Hope you will like this video, and in the next video we are going to start with the window rolling function, and we will see how the window rolling function will aggregate the data set. So that's all for this tutorial. Thanks for watching.